I'm in Vienna, Austria this last couple days, listening to similar speakers to the ones we had in Hungary, who are pronouncing a death knell for Europe as we know it. It's really quite frightening because they're the canary in the coal mine, folks. They are what is predicting what is about to come to North America. And if we're not going to wake up to that fact sooner rather than later, we're going to face the same problems that they are facing currently. So just a little quick recap for you. We had several interesting speakers today, one of whom you could almost call her a heroine or a person who is unique in that she stands out from the establishment expectation in spite of all the pressures and personal losses that she incurs to stand up for freedom of speech, the same way that Tommy Robinson does in England and that Faith Goldie does in Toronto. And she is isolated from everybody and persecuted to a degree by the people who should really be rallying to support her. Her name is Elizabeth. I don't pronounce her last name very well. She was fined here in Austria. She's an American who lives in Austria, married to an Austrian. She was fined for discussing the Prophet Muhammad having married a young girl at 6 years old and consummated that marriage at 9. So she was convicted of I'm reading from my notes here because this is incredulous. A denigration of religious teaching, not hate crime. No, she was convicted of a denigration of religious teaching. She appealed that and lost, and the result was that she was told that they called it an excess of opinion for stating that Muhammad married a young girl and consecrated that marriage at a young age. That's an excess of opinion, according to these judges in Austria. Now, in Europe here, they have a human rights court the same way that we do in Canada, which is a kangaroo court. It operates separate from the judicial system, but it carries a lot of weight and penalty for the person who's accused of a human rights crime. In Article 10 of their constitution, I guess, they have a subheading on freedom of expression with exceptions. So what they say is you need to balance the rights of the individual to speak freely with the feelings that need to be protected and the religious beliefs of those people preserved. This particular person, I think her name was Elizabeth, I'm going to botch the pronunciation, but Elizabeth Sabadich-Wolf. She was ostracized from her community. She lost her job. She was sued, appealed, lost, appealed again, lost. She's now given up trying to do anything here in Austria, and she's moving to the United States with her cause for freedom of speech, where there is actually a free speech amendment to the Constitution. But this to me, it's the canary in the coal mine here in Austria. It's a death knell sounding. It's to say to us who are watching, wake up. It's not long before this comes to your doorstep. And if you do nothing to prevent it, you too will be muzzled. And this goes to the progressives as well, that seem to think that they are accepted from the kind of tyranny that will ensue if they don't protect the borders from the invasion of the Muslims, and let's call it for what it is, that are trying to overtake our populations. Some of the other speakers we heard today here in Austria and Vienna, the population of Muslims is doubling every decade. So in 1980, it was 8%, and it's anticipated to double within the next few years. Again, it's gone up and up. and projected to be at over 25% in 2050. And there's this willful ignorance on the part of the populace who seems to think that as long as they can go along to get along, what does it matter to them whether they're Muslims or not, whether they integrate or not. The other area that was mentioned as an area of notable problems were the hospitals, where you don't want to have to think that when you go to a hospital you're going to have to worry about being violently attacked, which is what is going on there right now. Either the doctors are being attacked or other patients, and these attacks are on the rise. And certainly none of the perpetrators of these attacks are named Hans or Fritz. These are all people coming from this migrant wave that Angela Merkel let in back in 2015. Also, there's schools, and this should be sounded as a warning for us here in Ontario. 50% and sometimes as much as 80% of students in schools are non-natives, do not speak German, which is the language here in Austria, so that the attention has to be focused on bringing them up to standard with the other students enrolled in the classes so that they can all be at the same level when they are being educated. So what is the solution? The solution, according to the Freedom Party of Austria, which just got knocked off its perch by a controversy and a scandal in their government, so there was a vote of non-confidence in that. The Freedom Party, which was in a position of governing up until today, is now no longer in power, had an interesting platform, so we'll see what happens with that. But essentially there were 4 points. Because you can't just complain about these things. You have to have a solution. So number one, put an end to migration for purely economic benefits. Makes sense to me. If you're just coming over to our countries in the West here to sit on the government payroll, sorry, but that's not going to happen. Number two, a selection of immigrants with shared values. That's very important. And legitimate reasons for coming. What are the reasons? You're not refugees, particularly in Canada, if you're coming from a third safe country like the United States. Number three, a family policy. So let's encourage more children amongst us Canadians, for example. In Austria, it would be for the Austrians. Let's reward somehow people who produce more children who are part of the existing culture that's been here for time immemorial. And number four, integration. So there needs to be a values test for integration. If you're not subscribing to that, you lose your benefits. It's a scary proposition to think that if we continue to ignore at our peril this mass overtaking of our culture, our values, and our ability to govern according to our Judeo-Christian values. If nothing is done about this in the next decade or two, we may be in for some of the most severe population disagreements that have existed during our lifetimes. And heaven forbid they should turn violent, but I think that the general feeling is that if this problem, which the elites fail to recognize, does not resolve, then that's where we're headed.